Welcome, I'm Bill Wake. This is my summary of the work we've done on Twitch this week. We're working on making a tool set for dulcimer players, and the first part of the week was working on the calendar, and the second part on the metronome. So in the calendar, we updated the description field. We kind of resolved a few issues with converting HTML to Markdown, and then we added the ability to have favorites on your calendar. And then finally, we updated the virtual section, which formerly just contained virtual only events, and now it contains hybrid virtual events too. And we started work on the metronome. Let's see a demo and take a code walkthrough. We'll start with the calendar. All right, so the first thing different is that ability to see better stuff in the notes field. So we had some weird extra stars and things like that, some markdown issues before from our toolkit, and we've cleaned up that enough to make most of them look okay. But anyway, you've got the ability to put the notes as shown or not shown. And the second thing was we added the ability to mark things as favorites. And if you want to see what you've marked, you've got this list. So I've got Dulcie Moon, a couple things in June, something in July, September, October. Okay, so these might be festivals I'm considering going to, say. And we still support location. That didn't change any. And the last thing we added was if the website had a link, we have a button that takes you to follow that link. So Dulcie Moon is one of the festivals, and that button takes us there. The next thing we worked on then was the metronome, and we had already done a pretty well spike of the user interface. We added some spikes of playing sounds. I don't know if those are active right now, but the big thing that's functional is if you change the beats. So let's make a 6/8. So the number of columns corresponds to the numerator here. The bottom, the denominator, that's going to control which character this is. So we haven't worked that one out yet, but you can select different sounds. So there's a low, a medium, and a high sound. And if you select a sound on a beat, you've got that one. You can only pick one, so it's kind of like an option radio button kind of thing. And if you tap this again, it goes back to empty. So you don't have to have a beat, a pulse on every beat. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 1, 6/8 is usually 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we'll put a heavy beat on the first beat of the two halves, and then maybe something like that. So we can kind of hear the difference. But this will grow up to 12. It's a little squeezed, but I think it's all right. As far as like enough room for your fingertip. The spike was intended to do some sound work. So we included a library that does sounds, and but we don't have this triggered yet. And then we also need to add a stop and start button, and start making it have sounds come out. All right. And then I've got a couple other features in mind for it. I don't know if we'll do them or not, but one of them is making omitting sounds randomly. So just to kind of improve your working with this, maybe a third of the sounds don't come in. So you can check that you're still keeping a steady beat, even if the metronome isn't making any noise. And I guess one last feature on this, if you shrink this back down, but then you grow it again, we still keep whatever you clicked on those high count beats. But it's got to be said, most music is 4/4, maybe 6/8 once in a while, 3/4 relatively common, but 12/8 is pretty unusual. There are some Irish tunes that definitely use it, and a few other tunes out there. I think Lift Every Voice and Sing might be 12/8. But it's enough to get you going. So it's a basic start, but I'm happy we're there. Okay, so some things in the code. I guess the first thing is that question of the description. So let me go down here where we create, we're given an ICE event. So ICS file, iCalendar, some format they had, but it's been adopted more generally, so Google will export it. You take that kind of event and you produce the kind of event that we have. And so the description is the part we focused on. We decode the text, which says the ICS file has it has its own escape codes, and so we reverse those or apply those. So \n, meaning \n, it gets replaced with a new line. Commas, semicolons, and backslashes are escaped. So we peel those out or swap those out. And then when you want to create the actual event, there's the notes field is based on the description, and we're calling toMarkdown on that. So the original format is HTML, then encoded into the ICS file. We've reversed the ICS file. Now we're taking the HTML and converting it to Markdown, which Swift's text knows how to show Markdown. So we're relying on it to do the actual visual formatting once we get Markdown format. Okay, now there was one little trick in there, and that is we remove extra bold tags. So this is that weirdness I was mentioning. So the Google export, I found that a lot of times it would export this pattern: strong, bold, break, undo the bold, undo the strong. And so it's turning on strong or bold text for the new line and then turning it off before you use it. So this is really equivalent to just a break. And I don't know why Google does it that way, but at least some of the Markdown descriptions we saw said stuff like bold should not spread past the end of a line. And so the Markdown converter we have does not understand that, or it doesn't seem to have that rule itself. So these create extra stars that aren't actually functional. So they're part of the Markdown, but they're not wanted. So I put it down to maybe a different interpretation of the Markdown in this toMarkdown package we're using versus the interpretation that the text uses, all triggered by some weirdness on Google's part. So, it's a bit of a hack, but it got rid of many or several of these instances of weird tagging. And so we'll take it. If there were other things that needed some little replacements, we would do it. All right, the favorites, we're maintaining those as app storage, which is for small things, not temporary storage. It's persistent on your phone. If you would uninstall the app, it may go away, but in general, it just stays there and updates when you update it. So if you toggle something, we save its event to that list of favorites, and if you untoggle it, we remove it. So in the end, you have the ones you've selected are showing up in this favorites list. And so we look in that list and ask, do you contain this event's ID? So event view shows one event. If you contain it, you get a star or a heart, a red heart. If you don't, you get a gray heart. And the button for the heart is toggling. So it will flip it from red to gray or gray to red. And then the rest of it is just the event. As you'd expect, we put the date, the location, the name. If there is a URL, we show that with a link to whatever URL they gave us. And if if the show details is on, then we show the notes field that we would have parsed with that problem earlier. Okay. The last aspect we looked at was the virtual events. And so we added a new function that basically gives us a list of events that correspond to that. So if basically it runs through all events ending after the start date, so they're active events, filters out the ones that say they're virtual, whether virtual or hybrid, and then matches them against any search text you have, and then sorts them appropriately. So just a little tweak on the way we get that view. All right, now the metronome view. We had some spike up here. Oh, I probably have my sound off. All right, but the core of it, the time signature view, 4/4, 3/4, 6/8, 12/8, whatever it is. And then the sound grid view, they both now share the numerator. And so the sound grid view uses that numerator to decide how many columns to show. And then we have the BPM view. There's nothing different about that from what we did earlier, but it's got a little slider or a little stepper that you can choose how many beats per minute. Right now it had that quarter note and then a couple of weird missed characters. For some reason, Apple has them in their Unicode, but they don't actually support them in the app, which is the quarter note, half note, or eighth note. We'll work on that and make it so that the time signature view, when you set the denominator, also sets the value of that, whether it's quarter, half, or whatever. And then finally, we just have a little function, beats per minute. I don't know, this is probably going to grow up a little, but right now it's just calculating if you say something is so many beats per minute, how long should it get for each beat? So say you said 120 beats per minute. 60 divided by 120 is a half. So a half second per beat. So if it were 60, it's 1 second per beat. If it's 240, it's a quarter second per beat. And that's really a fast beat. All right. So coming up, we're going to get that denominator working so we can show the half, quarter, or eighth note. And we're going to get some sounds playing and get the thing working as a rhythmic tool. I don't know what's next after that. We may do another tool. We may do some refinement of the existing ones. I'm going to get somebody looking at it besides me and besides people with me while we watch this on or work this out on Twitch. Maybe start a little bit of a beta test. I have a bunch of ideas for tools, but it's always a question of which ones are really useful for people and, give something a little different. So I've got some that are focused on like how do you do chords in a dulcimer or I guess patterns in a hammer dulcimer that give you chords. Those are specific to dulcimer, so they feel a little more useful or a little more important to implement than some of the others that are more generic. I don't know. We're closing into a useful subset, at least a starter set. So it's time to get some other eyes on it. All right. You can join us Monday through Thursday, 2 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time or 7 to 9:30 p.m. UTC. xp123.com/Twitch takes you to the live sessions, and xp123.com/YouTube takes you to the old sessions, time delayed a couple weeks and lightly edited. Thanks for watching.